With Ghostface on the horizon, it's got me looking back at all the Mortal Kombat guest characters, and I've been thinking, which ones are my favourite and which ones are on the opposite end? With over a decade of MK guest characters to choose from, this video rates from bottom to top what I think of every guest character the franchise has seen so far, from MK9 to Mortal Kombat 1. Now, I did make a competitive history about the guests in the past, and that was more of a history lesson about the meta. This video is about my personal thoughts on the ones that I liked and didn't like. Plus, we now have the MK1 guest characters to add to the mix. So, join me today as I officially rate the guest characters in Mortal Kombat so far. When it comes to the format, I think it's best that I start with my least favourite characters and then work my way up to eventually who I like the most. I'll try and be fair with my points, making sure that I at least mention some of the stuff that I liked, but that said, let's talk about my least favourite guest character first. My least favourite guest character ever released was Freddy in MK9. Now, before anyone already gets angry at me over that, here's why I think so. To me, a character like Freddy Krueger was just kind of wasted potential in this one. When you look at what the other guests are doing in gameplay or cinematics, there's a lot of things that characters identify with in there, a celebration of what that character is known for, in almost every case. With Freddy, his entire gameplay was just overall disappointing to me. The guy just sits full screen and throws gloves at you, and when he isn't, he's just using his other glove attacks to mix you up and juggle. And even then, the Freddy in this game isn't really a distinguishable character. No dialogue, no Robert Englund, no nothing. When you think of Freddy Krueger in a fighting game, there is so much more that you could, in theory, do with him, that I truly believe that if Freddy was in any other MK post MK9, we would have got a very different character with a lot more going on. My second least favourite guest character is RoboCop from MK11. Now, here is where I want to introduce what Mustard and I often refer to as action figure normals. Animations and attacks that look very stiff and clunky. And to be completely fair, RoboCop is the one character you'd thoroughly expect to have that kind of stuff. He's not exactly agile in the movies, is he? That being said, a reason for a character playing completely stiff and awkward doesn't exactly mean I have to enjoy playing or watching the character. And that's where RoboCop falls short for me. I'm not a huge fan of the RoboCop franchise. I mean, yeah, I enjoyed the first movie back in the day, and I'm never going to falter Peter Weller's performance as Alex Murphy, but in MK11, RoboCop plays exactly how you'd expect. Sit full screen and shoot various pistol attacks. RoboCop is just not very fun to watch or play, in my opinion. I don't think he particularly fits the MK universe to begin with, and when you take a character that I'm not very attached to and combine it with the fact the gameplay is very unappealing as a spectator, RoboCop just didn't do anything for me. Up next, it's Peacemaker from Mortal Kombat 1. I'll be honest, I dislike Peacemaker for a very similar reason to RoboCop. Fundamentally, I do not enjoy watching the gameplay of this character at all, and the action figure normals return in full force. Again, this isn't surprising because Peacemaker is not a heavy, agile character in the show, and the comedic side of this character, thanks to John Cena with the dialogue and even the brutality animations, is definitely my favourite thing about this character. But again, the cinematics and the stuff that makes you chuckle only lasts a short moment, whereas seeing Peacemaker shoot gun and throw eagerly for an entire game back in the Peacemaker meta was a lot more prominent. Peacemaker gave us what was, in my opinion, the worst meta of MK1 so far, where the character had by far the highest pick rate at the time, and it was nearly impossible to tell one Peacemaker player apart from another. It felt like Peacemaker would have been much more of a fitting Injustice character than Mortal Kombat, and the slow-paced projectile-heavy gameplay would have been a greater fit in the DC fighting game. Okay, after Peacemaker comes Homelander in Mortal Kombat 1, who I've put right next to Peacemaker for a specific reason. Overall, I dislike them almost equally, but if you were to force me to choose, I'd say that I prefer watching Homelander to Peacemaker in tournament play. Don't get me wrong, I don't like either of them, but Homelander is a tiny bit more enjoyable to watch. The number one issue that Homelander has is that he's just kind of flinging his limbs at you, going into float, doing mix-ups from the float, and rinse-repeating the same set play that we've seen 100 times over. Now, this is the only time with all of the guest characters that a specific situation occurred with the source material. Homelander in MK1 is clearly based on Homelander from The Boys TV show. There is no comic book focus here, so all you have to go by is the show itself. Now here's the problem. If anyone's actually watched The Boys, Homelander does no fighting. He only fights a couple of times in all 4 current seasons, so you've basically got nothing to work with, and you have to start from the ground up. Now, I know that is in line with his character in the show, is that he's so powerful and he cares so little for human life that he just lazily eye lasers everything without caring about collateral damage. But if you're putting this character in a fighting game, that's going to be a tricky starting point. I guess one good thing is that Homelander is a unique character design. There really is no other character that plays like him here, but I'm still not very thrilled when I watch the character compete. Overall, I'm just not a fan. Closing out my personal bottom 5 is Rambo from Mortal Kombat 11. I've got to be honest, this one was tricky to write about, mostly because I keep forgetting he's even in the game to begin with. MK11 had the theme of action heroes for the guests, so it made sense that someone like Rambo would eventually appear. I do thoroughly like the fact that they got Sylvester Stallone to reprise the role for the voice acting, and there are tons of Rambo references in the gameplay and the cinematics and stuff like that, but I just think that Rambo in Mortal Kombat is a pretty bland gameplay experience. He's not exactly the gun-only character like some people were concerned about. He does have much more of a brawler archetype who gets in and threatens stuff like a command grab or his cruel stance. But there's always been something about Rambo in this game that's just a bit boring overall, and I can't even put my finger on it. I just find Rambo to be one of the more forgettable guest characters the franchise has seen. He's number 5 in this list because I definitely don't dislike him more than the other characters I've mentioned, but I definitely can't say I like him more than the remaining characters, so bottom 5 it is. Now we enter the middle of the pack. I don't dislike these characters, but they're definitely not my favourite. And remember, this list is ordered from bottom to top. The Joker from MK11 is our next character, and it's more the fact that his design didn't exactly blow me away, but the character was interesting from a gameplay perspective, and there was some decent variety there. The biggest thing I feel when talking about the Joker in Mortal Kombat is that I actually preferred his Injustice version over the Mortal Kombat one. I liked all the tricky setups and the weird stuff that the Injustice version brought to the table, and the Joker in MK11 felt like a much more tame character. It does fit within MK11 to be fair. MK11 was not a crazy mix-up game. That said, the Joker is definitely a mid pick for me. A cool concept and fit into the meta nicely, but I just wasn't that interested in him personally. Right, now some of you might be angry at me here, but it's Jason Voorhees from MKX next. Of all 4 guest characters in MKX, I resonated the least with Jason. Jason was a cool brawler type character, and don't get me wrong, his high damage command grabs, his damage buff, the slasher variation or his resurrection, all that stuff was really neat, but remember those action figure normals I told you about earlier? Jason is another case where there's not much to be done that can make his gameplay visually exciting. He's one of the more simple characters in MKX because he's all about good mids, tick throws, armor, huge chunks of damage in a short space of time. He does the job, but I just don't find him crazy fun to watch. But I think that's also that MKX is a very flashy game full of interesting variations, and Jason doesn't have that same sense of style that makes me enjoy watching high-level MKX. Omni-Man from MK1 is my current favourite guest character they've released in that game so far, and I believe this because if anyone's actually watched that first season of Invincible, the spirit of this character has been preserved pretty damn well in my opinion. He's brutal, he's got a lot of impact to his special moves and even the mobility tools. His combos with the lightning fast side switching and the air combat, all of that is thoroughly satisfying. There's not huge layers of depth with Omni-Man, but this brute force design that you would associate with Omni-Man is very much there. And when you look at high-level play with the different kind of cameos, Omni-Man can be pretty flashy as well. He's far from my favourite guest, but I definitely like what he's doing in this game, and he's one of my favourite characters to watch in Mortal Kombat 1 at the moment. The character just outside of my top 5 is the Terminator from MK11. This is very much a personal preference thing, because you might find it hypocritical that I've spent a whole video complaining about action figure normals, and then I have Terminator up this high, but hear me out. Terminator is going to have those kind of attacks. He's Arnie's Terminator, he's the T-800. This didn't come as a surprise to me, and you know what? That down 3 that everyone likes to meme over is one of the best anti-airs in the game, so I say it's fine the way it is. The main reason I like Terminator in MK11 is that his gameplay is one of my favorite things to see in high level. This character absolutely destroys you with a steamroll effect once he gets going, and it's constant mix-ups, flashy KB animations, command grabs, overhead low, weird juggles and restands. You watch someone get annihilated by crazy mix and you just think, you know what? Yeah, this dude got terminated. It is a brutal design that is similar to Jason from MKX, but for me, it's taken to the next level. I really like this character, and that's why he is my top 6 for today's video. Alright folks, it's top 5 time. Kratos from Mortal Kombat 9, the first proper guest they ever made, and although this character was banned due to being a PS3 exclusive, I really loved what they did with the character, as someone that has never played God of War, by the way. Kratos in MK9 has extremely fun combos, hits like a truck, has some tools that no one else had, like this weird projectile reflect but also projectile thing. If Kratos were ever tournament legal back in the day, he actually would have had a strong place in the meta as a character that could actually fight Cabal. Something unheard of, believe it or not. The quick time events were some of his special moves, his absurd combo pathing. Kratos is one of the lesser known guests because you combine old game with console exclusivity, and some of you may really have never known anything about him, but he was a very strong start for the line of guests, and a character they did a superb job with. Number 4 is Leatherface from MKX. I'm a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so I was actually hyped when this character got revealed in the KP2 trailer. The character design is really interesting to me. The 3 variations, the straight up terrifying design of a character who's much faster than you'd expect and chucks out this insanely high damage output. It was a match made in heaven. The variations were super sick, mostly because they did cater to different eras of the Leatherface character. Pretty Lady with the suit that just didn't fit him, Butcher from the highly underrated mid-2000s movies with Arlie Ermey, rest in peace to a legend by the way, and then the Killer variation, which was by far the most common one we would see in the game. Although Pretty Lady wasn't that interesting, because it was kind of almost like Freddy from MK9, you know, just throw chainsaws at them I guess. Butcher with the Vortex and Killer with the stance, that was a nightmare to fight by the way, made this character so sick overall. If you like MKX and you haven't played Leatherface yet, this is a character worth trying, because oh my lord, he is fun. Top 3 time folks, and number 3 is Alien from MKX. I know the meta of Alien back in the day was miserable because the character was so broken, but Alien as a guest character was completely nailed in this game. This character had 3 super interesting variations that fit the xenomorph design. The character was visceral, violent, brutal, the exact kind of gameplay you'd expect from a character that everyone wanted to see. Conjurer was definitely a personal favourite because the egg set play was really funny but also perfectly on brand, but honestly all 3 variations were cool, all the same. MKX was the darkest and most gnarly Mortal Kombat they've done so far, and Alien was a perfect addition. One of the reasons being that a certain other character was in the game as well that isn't far off. My second favourite guest character of all time is Spawn from MK11. Spawn was a perfect fit for the extremely cinematic gameplay of MK11. Everything this character did, from the intro or outro animations, the KBs, the finishing moves, it was such a perfect demonstration of Todd McFarlane's legendary character design. The gameplay was really cool as well, especially when you see stuff like Soul Forfeit with some of the largest combos in the game, with some of the highest damage too. The fact that Keith David once again voiced the iconic character just being the icing on the cake. Keith David's voice could melt anything, by the way. From the customization options, the gameplay, the voice, the extra flair, Spawn in MK11 was a perfect guest, and one I will always remember fondly. I'm sure most of you know who's left, but let's just say it anyway. My all-time favorite guest character is Predator from MKX. This guest is the greatest they have ever done. Predator is one of the most badass characters in fiction anyway, and the character was perfectly executed in Mortal Kombat X. No matter the variation, this character was doing all sorts of cool business, all tied to the lore and source material. Hishkaton's plasma cannon, Hunter's traps, Warrior's self-destruct, the sound effects, the combo possibilities, the bloody smart disc for crying out loud. It is hard to put into words just how much of a good job NRS did with the Predator in this game, and I know I'm not alone in this. Predator was a spot-on addition to the high-octane and wild gameplay that MKX provided, and having a high-level match of Alien vs Predator was a dream match that kicked ass in this game. I'm definitely not the only person that thinks Predator is the greatest guest character, so if you agree or even disagree, by all means, let me know. And that's my rating for all of the guest characters in Mortal Kombat. Thank you so much for watching, and look after yourselves. I'll see you next time.